Hi, I'm Margaret, 26 years old, and I thought my college graduation would be the proudest day of my life. Growing up, I always imagined my parents beaming with pride as I walked across that stage. I pictured my mom wiping away tears of joy, and my dad telling everyone about his daughter's accomplishments. Instead, that day became the moment I realized some people will never see your worth, no matter how hard you try to prove it. Before I share what happened that day, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if this resonates with you. Trust me, what happened next changed everything about how I see family loyalty. Let me take you back to where this all started. I grew up in suburban Ohio in one of those picture-perfect neighborhoods where every lawn was manicured and every family seemed to have their act together. My father Harold worked as a successful insurance executive, always dressed in crisp suits and carrying himself like he owned the world. My mother Beatrice had been a teacher before I was born, but gave up her career to focus on raising what she called the perfect family. The problem was, in their eyes, I was never part of that perfection. My older brother Kenneth was their golden child. From the moment he could walk, everything he did was celebrated like a national holiday. When Kenneth scored his first soccer goal at age 6, my parents threw a backyard party. When he made honor roll in middle school, they took out an ad in the local newspaper. When he got accepted to medical school, they literally had a catered celebration and invited half the neighborhood. Me, I was the afterthought. The daughter who never quite measured up to their impossibly high standards. I remember being 8 years old, proudly showing my parents a painting I'd made in art class. The teacher had called it exceptional and hung it on the classroom wall for everyone to see. I ran home that day practically bursting with excitement, ready to share my achievement. "Look what I made," I announced, holding up my artwork like it was the Mona Lisa. My father barely glanced up from his newspaper. "That's nice, Margaret. Did you finish your math homework?" My mother took a longer look, but her response was even worse. "It's very colorful, sweetie. Maybe next time try to stay inside the lines better. Kenneth's artwork was always so neat and precise when he was your age." That became the pattern of my entire childhood. Every accomplishment was either ignored or compared unfavorably to something Kenneth had done. When I made the honor roll myself, they said Kenneth had made it with higher grades. When I got into the school play, they mentioned how Kenneth had been the lead in his productions. When I showed interest in art therapy as a career path, they called it impractical and suggested I follow Kenneth into something more respectable, like medicine or law. By the time I was in high school, I'd stopped expecting praise. I focused on my studies, threw myself into my art, and tried to build the self-confidence my parents seemed determined to tear down. I had good friends who appreciated my creativity, teachers who recognized my potential, and a guidance counselor who encouraged me to pursue my passion for helping others through art therapy. But deep down, I still craved my parents' approval. I told myself that someday when I achieved something truly remarkable, they'd finally see me for who I really was. College became my escape and my opportunity to prove myself. I chose a university 3 hours away, far enough to build my own identity, but close enough that my parents could visit if they wanted to. They never did. I threw myself into my studies with a determination that surprised even me. Art therapy combined everything I loved: creativity, psychology, and the opportunity to help people heal. I maintained a high GPA, participated in research projects, and completed internships at local hospitals and counseling centers. My professors praised my natural ability to connect with clients, and I started to believe I might actually be good at something. But every phone call home was a reminder that my achievements didn't matter to the people whose opinions I valued most. When I told my parents about making the dean's list, my mother's first response was, "That's wonderful, dear. Did I tell you Kenneth just got selected for a prestigious research fellowship?" When I shared news about my senior thesis being selected for the university's showcase, my father said, "That sounds interesting. Kenneth's medical school applications are really impressing the admissions committees." No matter what I accomplished, Kenneth's achievements were always bigger, better, more important. The worst part was that Kenneth himself wasn't the problem. When we talked privately, he was actually supportive and encouraging. He'd tell me how proud he was of my artistic abilities and how he could never do what I was doing. But around our parents, he played into their favoritism because it was easier than challenging their narrative. As graduation approached, I found myself caught between excitement and dread. This was supposed to be my moment. 4 years of hard work, countless late nights studying, and genuine achievements in my field. I was graduating summa cum laude. I had already received 2 job offers from respected therapy programs, and my professors were recommending me for graduate school opportunities. Surely this would be enough to make my parents proud. Surely this would be the day they finally saw me as successful. I should have known better. The week leading up to graduation was a whirlwind of emotions and preparations. I'd been looking forward to this day for months, imagining how it would feel to walk across that stage and finally be recognized for all my hard work. My diploma wasn't just a piece of paper. It represented 4 years of proving to myself that I was capable of excellence even if my family couldn't see it. I called my parents on Monday to confirm the details for Saturday's ceremony. "Hi, Mom, just wanted to make sure you have all the information for graduation. The ceremony starts at 10 a.m., and I'll have 3 tickets waiting for you, Dad, and whoever else you'd like to bring." "Oh, yes, Margaret. Your father and I will be there. We've already arranged to take the day off work." Her tone was pleasant but distant, like she was confirming a dentist appointment rather than celebrating her daughter's college graduation. "I'm really excited for you both to be there. This has been such an amazing 4 years, and I've achieved so much. I can't wait to share it with you." "That's nice, dear. Kenneth called yesterday to tell us about his latest research publication. It's being featured in a major medical journal. Your father is absolutely beside himself with pride." My heart sank, but I pressed on. "That's great for Kenneth. But Mom, I wanted to tell you about my own achievements too. I'm graduating summa cum laude, which means I'm in the top 5% of my class. And I've already received job offers from 2 different therapy programs." "Summa cum laude? Well, that's certainly good. Kenneth graduated magna cum laude from his undergraduate program, but of course medical school is much more challenging." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "I also wanted to let you know that my senior thesis is being featured in the university's annual showcase. My advisor says it's some of the most innovative work she's seen in art therapy applications." "Art therapy," my mother repeated, and I could practically hear her sighing through the phone. "Margaret, you know your father and I still think you should consider a more traditional career path. It's not too late to apply for graduate programs in business or education." "Mom, I love what I do. I'm good at it, and I'm already getting recognition in the field. These job offers I mentioned, they're with prestigious programs that specifically sought me out because of my work." "If you say so, dear. We'll see you on Saturday." The conversation with my father was even shorter and more discouraging. When I tried to share my excitement about graduation day, he spent most of the call talking about a new client he'd landed at work and how Kenneth's residency applications were progressing. "Dad, I'm graduating with highest honors. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "Of course it does, Margaret. Your mother and I are very pleased that you're finishing school. It's important to have a degree even if it's in a field that's not particularly practical." "It is practical, Dad. Art therapy is a growing field with real applications in hospitals, schools, and private practice. I'm going to be helping people." "Well, that's a noble goal. Just make sure you have a backup plan. Kenneth always says the medical field is stable because people will always need doctors." By Thursday, I was oscillating between determination and despair. My roommate Sandra noticed my mood and tried to cheer me up by showing me photos from her family's graduation preparations. Her parents had booked a hotel room 2 months in advance, planned a celebration dinner at my favorite restaurant in town, and her mom had already bought a new dress for the occasion. "They're driving 8 hours just to watch me walk across a stage for 30 seconds. Sandra laughed. "My mom keeps texting me asking if there's anything special I want them to bring or do while they're here." I smiled, genuinely happy for her, but the contrast was painful. My parents were driving 3 hours and treating it like an obligation rather than a celebration. Friday afternoon. I received an email that made my heart soar. My academic advisor, Dr. Williams, had nominated me for the Outstanding Student Achievement Award in my department. The email explained that I was one of only 3 students selected for this honor and that I would be recognized during the graduation ceremony. I called my parents immediately to share the news. "Mom, you'll never believe what just happened. I've been selected for the Outstanding Student Achievement Award in my department. They're going to recognize me during the actual ceremony." "That's very nice, Margaret." "Nice, Mom, this is a huge honor. Only 3 students in the entire art therapy program received this recognition." "I'm sure it is, dear. Listen, I need to run to the grocery store before it gets too busy. We'll see you tomorrow morning." She hung up before I could say anything else. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to manage my expectations for the next day. Part of me kept hoping that seeing me receive this special recognition would finally make my parents understand how well I'd done. Maybe watching me walk across that stage as an honored graduate would be the moment everything clicked for them. But a bigger part of me was preparing for disappointment. 22 years of experience had taught me that my parents saw what they wanted to see, and what they wanted to see was Kenneth's success, not mine. I decided that regardless of their reaction, I was going to be proud of myself. I'd worked hard, achieved real success, and built a foundation for a career I was passionate about. Their approval would be a wonderful bonus, but it couldn't be the measure of my worth. Little did I know that by the end of the next day, I'd finally stop seeking their approval altogether. Graduation day dawned bright and sunny, the kind of perfect May morning that made everything feel possible. I woke up early, too excited and nervous to sleep any longer, and spent extra time getting ready. I wanted to look perfect for what I hoped would be one of the best days of my life. My cap and gown hung on my closet door like a symbol of everything I'd accomplished. When I put them on and looked in the mirror, I felt a surge of pride that no one could take away from me. This was my moment, my achievement, my day. I arrived at the ceremony venue 2 hours early for the graduate check-in and rehearsal. The energy was infectious. Hundreds of students and families filled the campus with excitement and celebration. I watched other families taking photos, hugging and beaming with pride at their graduates. Parents wore T-shirts with their children's names and graduation years. Siblings held balloons and flowers. Everyone seemed to radiate joy and accomplishment. My family arrived exactly on time, which somehow felt fitting. Not early enough to show extra enthusiasm, but not late enough to cause a scene. My parents looked appropriately dressed for the occasion, but their expressions were more subdued than I'd hoped. They'd brought my Aunt Joyce, my father's sister, who had always been more supportive of my artistic pursuits than my immediate family. "Congratulations, sweetheart." Aunt Joyce rushed over to hug me as soon as she saw me. "I'm so proud of you. 4 years of hard work paying off." "Thanks, Aunt Joyce. I'm really excited you could make it." My mother gave me a polite hug and adjusted my cap. "You look very nice, Margaret. Very professional." My father shook my hand formally like we were meeting for a business appointment. "Congratulations on finishing school. That's quite an accomplishment." Their lukewarm responses stung, but I tried to focus on the positive. They were here, they'd taken time off work, and maybe once they saw the ceremony, they'd understand how significant this day really was. The graduation ceremony itself was everything I dreamed it would be. Our class president gave an inspiring speech about the journey we'd all taken together. The keynote speaker, a renowned therapist and researcher in my field, talked about the importance of healing through creativity and how art therapy was revolutionizing mental health treatment. When they announced the Outstanding Student Achievement Awards, my heart pounded as I heard my name called. I walked to the front of the auditorium to receive my special recognition, and the applause from my classmates and professors felt like validation for every late night I'd spent working on projects and papers. From the stage, I could see my family in the audience. Aunt Joyce was clapping enthusiastically and wiping away tears. My parents were clapping politely, but their faces showed no particular emotion. They could have been watching a community theater performance rather than their daughter receiving academic honors. When my name was called for graduation, I walked across that stage with my head held high. The diploma in my hands represented not just 4 years of education, but 4 years of proving to myself that I was capable of excellence. As I shook hands with the dean and posed for the official photo, I felt a sense of accomplishment that no one could diminish. After the ceremony, families gathered for photos and celebrations across the campus. I was eager to share my excitement with my parents and hear their thoughts about the recognition I'd received. "So, what did you think?" I asked as we found a quiet spot for family photos. "It was a lovely ceremony," my mother replied. "Very well organized." "I meant about my achievement award. Did you hear when they announced my name for the Outstanding Student Achievement recognition?" "Oh yes, that was nice," my father said, already looking at his watch. "What time did you say our dinner reservation was?" I felt my enthusiasm deflating, but Aunt Joyce jumped in with genuine excitement. "Margaret, that award announcement gave me chills. The way they described your innovative research and your potential in the field, it was incredible. You should be so proud." "I am proud," I said, grateful for at least one family member who seemed to understand the significance of the day. We made our way to the restaurant I'd chosen for our celebration lunch. It was a nice place, not too fancy, but special enough to mark the occasion. I'd been looking forward to this meal for weeks, imagining sharing stories about my college experience and talking about my future plans with my family. As we settled into our booth, I decided to try one more time to engage my parents in meaningful conversation about my achievements. I wanted to tell you both more about the job offers I've received. I began pulling out my phone to show them the official letters. The first one is with Children's Hospital in Columbus. They specifically recruited me because of my research on art therapy applications for pediatric trauma patients. My mother glanced at the letter briefly. "That sounds very demanding. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of responsibility?" "I'm absolutely ready, Mom. I've been training for this through my internships and research projects. My supervisors have all said I have a natural gift for connecting with patients." "The second offer," I continued, "is with a private practice that specializes in family therapy. They want me to develop their new art therapy program from the ground up. It's exactly the kind of opportunity I've been hoping for." My father looked up from his menu. "What's the salary like for these positions? I hope you've considered the financial aspects of your career choice." Before I could answer, my mother's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her entire demeanor changed. "Oh, it's Kenneth," she announced, as if the president was calling. "I have to take this." She answered the phone with more enthusiasm than she'd shown all day. "Kenneth, how wonderful to hear from you. Yes, we're at Margaret's graduation lunch right now." I watched as my mother's face lit up in a way it never had when talking about my achievements. She put the phone on speaker without asking if I minded. "Hey everyone." Kenneth's voice filled our booth. "Sorry I couldn't make it to the graduation, Maggie. How did it go?" "It was beautiful," my mother gushed before I could respond. "Margaret looked very nice in her cap and gown." "That's great. Tell me about the ceremony, Maggie." I started to speak, but my father interrupted. "Kenneth, you should tell us about your latest research project. Your mother said you have some exciting news." And just like that, my graduation lunch became about Kenneth's achievements. For the next 20 minutes, my parents hung on every word as my brother described his research, his upcoming presentations, and his residency interviews. They asked detailed questions, offered enthusiastic praise, and showed the kind of genuine interest in his work that they'd never shown in mine. I sat there still wearing my graduation cap, watching my parents celebrate someone who wasn't even present while completely ignoring the person they'd supposedly come to honor. When Kenneth finally hung up, I tried one last time to redirect the conversation. "So about those job offers I mentioned," I said, my voice slightly strained. I think you'd be really impressed by the scope of opportunities available in art therapy. The field is expanding rapidly and there's growing recognition of how effective these treatments can be. My father put down his menu and looked at me with the kind of expression you'd give a child who just suggested they wanted to be a superhero when they grew up. "Margaret," he said, his tone condescending and dismissive, "you're nothing but a failure." The words hit me like a physical blow. Around our table, the restaurant continued its normal lunch service. Families celebrated graduations, anniversaries, and ordinary Sunday meals. But in our booth, the world had just collapsed. "Harold," Aunt Joyce gasped. My mother didn't defend me. She just sat there nodding slightly as if my father had simply stated an obvious fact. "You've spent 4 years studying something impractical," he continued, "pursuing a career that won't provide financial stability and convincing yourself that it matters. Your brother is going to be a doctor. He's going to save lives and make a real contribution to society. You're going to play with crayons and call it therapy." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but something else was building inside me too. Something that felt like clarity, like strength, like the final breaking of chains I'd been carrying my whole life. My mother finally spoke, her voice quiet but cutting. "We've always tried to be supportive, Margaret, but your father is right. It's time you faced reality about your choices." The restaurant around us seemed to fade away. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel the blood rushing through my veins, and in that moment I realized something profound. I was done seeking approval from people who would never give it. I was done being the daughter who wasn't good enough. I was done accepting their definition of my worth. And I was absolutely done sitting quietly while they destroyed what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. The restaurant had one of those small stages near the back where they occasionally hosted live music or special events. There was a microphone stand sitting there unused, waiting for someone brave enough to take it. I stood up from our table, my legs surprisingly steady despite the emotional earthquake that had just hit me. My family looked up in confusion as I straightened my graduation cap and smoothed down my gown. "Margaret, where are you going?" my mother asked. I didn't answer. I walked toward that microphone with a sense of purpose I'd never felt before. Behind me, I could hear Aunt Joyce saying something to my parents, her voice sharp with disapproval, but I couldn't make out the words over the sound of my own determination. The restaurant was moderately busy, filled with families enjoying their Sunday lunch. A few other graduation parties were scattered throughout the dining room, their tables decorated with balloons and flowers. I could see other students in caps and gowns celebrating with proud relatives. I reached the microphone and tapped it gently. The soft thump echoed through the restaurant's sound system, causing conversations to pause as people looked up to see what was happening. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the speakers. "I'm sorry to interrupt your meals, but I have something important to say." The restaurant fell into curious silence. I could see my parents' table from where I stood. My father looked mortified, my mother appeared to be sinking into her seat, and Aunt Joyce was watching me with an expression of proud anticipation. "My name is Margaret, and today I graduated summa cum laude from the university with a degree in art therapy. I received the Outstanding Student Achievement Award from my department, and I have 2 job offers from organizations that specifically recruited me for my skills and potential." A few people began to clap, including what appeared to be other graduation families who understood the significance of these achievements. "I'm sharing this with you," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "because the people who should be proudest of these accomplishments just told me that I'm nothing but a failure." A collective gasp went up from several tables. I could see other parents looking shocked, probably imagining how they would feel if someone said that about their own graduating children. So I want to say something publicly in front of witnesses so there's no confusion later. I looked directly at my parents' table. "Perfect. Then don't claim my success later." The words came out clear, firm, and absolutely certain. I felt lighter as I spoke them, as if I was releasing years of accumulated disappointment and resentment. When I'm featured in professional journals for my innovative therapy techniques, don't tell people I'm your daughter. When I open my own practice and help families heal from trauma, don't mention that you raised me. When I win awards or get recognition in my field, don't take any credit for my achievements." The restaurant was completely silent now except for my voice. Some people were recording with their phones, and I realized this moment was going to exist beyond just this room. Because success isn't about other people believing in you. It's about believing in yourself and doing the work anyway. I've spent 22 years trying to earn approval from people who were never going to give it. Today I'm graduating with honors from that experience too. I looked around the restaurant at the faces watching me. Some people were nodding, some were wiping away tears, and several parents were hugging their own children a little tighter. To everyone else here celebrating graduations, anniversaries, or just enjoying a nice meal with people who love and support you, cherish that. Not everyone is that lucky, but everyone deserves it. I stepped away from the microphone to thunderous applause. People were standing up clapping, and several other graduates in the restaurant were cheering. The restaurant manager approached me with tears in her eyes. "That was incredibly brave," she said quietly. "And for what it's worth, congratulations on your graduation and your achievements. Your lunch today is on the house." As I walked back toward my table, I could see that the dynamic had completely shifted. My parents sat in stunned silence while Aunt Joyce was beaming with pride and wiping away tears. "Margaret," my father started to say as I reached the table. "No," I interrupted, my voice calm but absolutely firm. "You said what you needed to say, and I said what I needed to say. Now I'm going to finish my graduation day with people who actually want to celebrate my achievements." I turned to Aunt Joyce. "Would you like to come with me to the campus reception? There are some professors and friends I'd love for you to meet." "I would be honored," she said, standing up immediately. As we prepared to leave, my mother finally found her voice. "Margaret, you're being dramatic. You can't just walk away from your family." I looked at her with what felt like complete clarity. "I'm not walking away from family. I'm walking away from people who don't treat me like family. There's a difference." "You'll regret this," my father said, his voice low and angry. "Maybe," I replied, "but I'll regret staying even more." Aunt Joyce and I left the restaurant together, stepping out into the bright sunshine of my graduation day. As we walked back toward campus, she linked her arm through mine. "I am so incredibly proud of you," she said. "Not just for your academic achievements, but for what you just did in there. That took courage. I'm not sure I would have had at your age." "I think I've been building up to that moment my entire life," I said. "It feels strange, but I actually feel lighter now, like I've been carrying around this heavy backpack for years, and I finally got to put it down." We spent the rest of the afternoon at the campus reception, where I introduced Aunt Joyce to my professors, my research advisor, and several classmates. She asked thoughtful questions about my work, expressed genuine interest in my future plans, and took dozens of photos of me with my diploma and awards. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to have family members who were truly proud of my achievements. It was better than I had ever imagined. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and consequences. My parents predictably did not take my public declaration well. The calls started that very evening. "Margaret, what you did today was completely unacceptable." My mother's voice was cold and sharp when I answered my phone. "You embarrassed your father and me in front of strangers, and you need to apologize immediately." "I embarrassed you," I replied, settling into my dorm room chair. "You told me I was a failure at my own graduation lunch. In public. How is that not embarrassing?" "That's different. We're your parents, and we have a right to give you guidance about your life choices." "Calling me a failure isn't guidance, Mom. It's cruelty." "You're being overly sensitive. Your father was just trying to help you understand the reality of your situation." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The reality of my situation is that I graduated with highest honors, received special recognition from my department, and have multiple job offers in my field. If that's failure, I'll take it. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with my mother alternating between guilt trips, attempts at manipulation, and demands that I apologize for my outburst. I listened patiently, recognizing patterns I'd never noticed before: the way she dismissed my feelings, the way she reframed their behavior as helpful rather than hurtful, the way she made my response to their treatment the problem rather than their treatment itself. When she finally hung up, frustrated by my refusal to apologize, I felt something I'd never experienced before: relief. Instead of the usual guilt and self-doubt that followed confrontations with my parents, I felt calm and confident in my position. My father called the next day, his approach more demanding than my mother's. "Margaret, you're going to call that restaurant and apologize to everyone who heard your little performance," he said without preamble. "Then you're going to apologize to your mother and me, and we're going to forget this whole thing happened." "I'm not doing any of those things, Dad." "Yes, you are. You're acting like a child, and it's time to grow up and take responsibility for your behavior." "I am taking responsibility. I'm taking responsibility for standing up for myself and refusing to accept disrespectful treatment anymore." "Disrespectful treatment? We're your parents. We fed you, clothed you, and paid for your education. You owe us respect." "I owe you gratitude for providing basic necessities, which I've always given you. But respect is earned through how you treat people, and telling me I'm a failure doesn't earn respect." The conversation escalated from there, with my father becoming increasingly angry and demanding while I remained surprisingly calm. By the end of the call, he'd threatened to cut off financial support, stop paying my car insurance, and remove me from their health insurance plan. "Do what you think is best, Dad," I said. "I'm 22 years old, and I'll figure it out." 3 days later, my brother Kenneth called. His approach was different, gentler, but still frustrating. "Maggie, what's going on? Mom and Dad are really upset about what happened at your graduation." "What's going on is that they called me a failure at what should have been a celebration of my achievements, and I finally stood up for myself. I know they can be difficult sometimes, but they love you. They're just worried about your future." "Kenneth, let me ask you something. Have they ever called you a failure?" There was a long pause. "No, but that's different." "How is it different?" "I don't know, it just is. Maybe they're more worried about you because your field is less traditional. Or maybe they respect you and don't respect me, and they've been showing that my entire life." We talked for over an hour, and while Kenneth was more sympathetic than our parents, he ultimately fell back on the familiar family dynamic of asking me to be the one to compromise, to apologize, to make peace. He meant well, but he'd benefited from our parents' favoritism for so long that he couldn't truly understand what it felt like to be on the other side. The most surprising call came from Aunt Joyce 2 weeks later. "Margaret, I wanted you to know that I've had some very frank conversations with your parents about what happened at your graduation." "Oh no, Aunt Joyce. I hope I didn't cause problems for you." "Honey, you didn't cause anything. Their behavior caused problems, and I told them exactly what I thought about it. I also told them some things they needed to hear about how they've treated you over the years." It turned out that Aunt Joyce had been watching the family dynamics for much longer than I'd realized. She'd seen the favoritism, the dismissive comments, and the way my achievements were always minimized. She'd never said anything before because she'd hoped my parents would grow out of it as I got older. "What you did at that restaurant was the bravest thing I've ever seen," she said. "And it needed to happen. Sometimes people need to see their behavior reflected back at them before they understand how damaging it's been." Through Aunt Joyce, I learned that my public declaration had sparked some serious conversations within the extended family. Several relatives had reached out to her saying they'd always noticed how differently my parents treated Kenneth and me, but had never felt it was their place to intervene. Meanwhile, my daily life was actually improving dramatically. Without the constant stress of trying to earn my parents' approval, I threw myself into preparing for my new career with enthusiasm and confidence. I accepted the position at Children's Hospital, excited about the opportunity to develop their art therapy program for pediatric trauma patients. My professors continued to be supportive and encouraging. Dr. Williams, my research advisor, even asked me to co-author a paper based on my thesis work. The recognition felt genuine and meaningful in a way that my parents' approval never had. I also started seeing a therapist myself, recognizing that 22 years of emotional manipulation and conditional love had left some scars that needed attention. Through therapy, I began to understand concepts like emotional abuse, gaslighting, and narcissistic family dynamics. I learned that my parents' behavior toward me had been harmful, not because they intended it to be, but because impact matters more than intent. Most importantly, I started to build a chosen family of friends, mentors, and supportive relatives who celebrated my achievements and encouraged my growth. For the first time in my life, I understood what healthy relationships felt like. But my parents weren't done trying to regain control. 6 months after graduation, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I was thriving in my new position at Children's Hospital, where my innovative approaches to art therapy were already making a difference in young patients' recovery processes. My supervisor had praised my natural intuition for working with traumatized children, and I'd been asked to present my techniques at a regional conference in the fall. I'd also started dating David, a social worker I'd met through my job. He was kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my work and my goals. When I told him about my graduation day confrontation with my parents, his response was immediate and supportive. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," he said. "No one should have to tolerate that kind of treatment, especially from family." It was refreshing to be with someone who didn't try to minimize my parents' behavior or suggest that I should just forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony. My living situation had also improved dramatically. I'd moved into a small apartment near the hospital, and while it wasn't luxurious, it was mine. Aunt Joyce had helped me with the security deposit, and several of my college friends had contributed furniture and household items. Creating my own space decorated with my artwork and filled with books about art therapy techniques felt like a physical manifestation of my new independence. The most significant change, though, was internal. I'd stopped checking my phone anxiously for approval from my parents. I'd stopped second-guessing my career choices or wondering if I was good enough. The constant background noise of self-doubt that had plagued me for years had finally quieted. But my parents were not adjusting well to their loss of control over my emotional well-being. The manipulation attempts started subtly. My mother began calling with family news that was designed to make me feel guilty about my absence from family events. Kenneth's birthday dinner had been so quiet without you there. My father's promotion at work would have been more meaningful if both his children had been there to celebrate. When guilt didn't work, they tried bribery. They offered to pay for graduate school if I would come home and discuss my future more rationally. They suggested family therapy with the clear implication that I was the problem that needed fixing. The most telling incident happened in October when I was featured in a local newspaper article about innovative therapy programs at Children's Hospital. The article included a photo of me working with a young patient and quoted my supervisor praising my exceptional ability to help children process trauma through creative expression. I posted the article on social media, proud of the recognition, and excited to share my professional success with friends and supportive family members. Within hours, my mother had shared it on her own Facebook page with the caption, "So proud of our daughter, Margaret's achievements. She gets her artistic talent from her mother's side of the family." I stared at that post in disbelief. 6 months earlier, they'd called my career choice impractical and me a failure. Now they wanted to claim credit for my success and share it with their social media network. I screenshot the post and sent it to Aunt Joyce with a message, "Remember when Dad said not to claim my success later?" Her response was immediate. "I remember exactly. And I remember you telling them not to. Some people have very selective memories." I decided not to respond to my mother's post directly, but the irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted the social media praise for having a successful daughter without having to actually support or respect that daughter. The pattern continued over the following months. Every professional achievement I posted was quickly shared by my parents with proud commentary, as if they'd been supportive all along. When I was selected to present at that regional conference, My father shared the announcement with a caption about how proud he was of my perseverance. The hypocrisy was staggering, but it also confirmed something important: my success was real, significant, and worth recognizing. Even my parents couldn't deny that anymore, even if they were trying to rewrite history about their role in it. Meanwhile, I was building genuinely supportive relationships with people who had earned the right to celebrate my achievements. David surprised me with flowers when I got the conference invitation. My colleagues at the hospital threw an impromptu celebration when my first research paper was accepted for publication. Aunt Joyce framed the newspaper article and hung it in her living room. These people had seen my work supported my goals and celebrated my successes from the beginning. Their pride in my achievements felt authentic because it was based on actually knowing and respecting who I was. The contrast became even more apparent when Kenneth called me in November with surprising news. "Maggie, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it from me first. I'm taking a leave of absence from my residency program." "What, Kenneth? Why are you okay?" "I'm burned out, Maggie. I've been struggling with anxiety and depression for months, and I finally had to admit that I don't think I want to be a doctor." I was shocked. Kenneth had seemed so confident in his path, so successful and driven. Our parents had held him up as the perfect example of career achievement for so long that I'd never considered he might be struggling. "Have you told Mom and Dad?" "I told them yesterday. They're not taking it well. Dad actually said maybe I should talk to you about alternative career paths, since you've always been more creative with your life choices." The irony was almost funny. 6 months ago, I was a failure for choosing a non-traditional career. Now Kenneth was being encouraged to consider my approach, because his traditional path wasn't working. "What do you want to do instead?" I asked. "I think I want to go into counseling, actually. Maybe family therapy. Working with you on your projects over the years made me realize how much I enjoy helping people work through emotional challenges rather than just treating physical symptoms." We talked for 2 more hours, and for the first time in our lives, Kenneth and I had a conversation as equals. He admitted that our parents' pressure had driven many of his decisions, and he'd never felt free to explore what he actually wanted to do with his life. He also apologized for not standing up for me more over the years. "I knew they treated you differently," he said. "I told myself it was just their way of showing concern, but I think I knew it was wrong. I was just too comfortable being the favorite to rock the boat." "I appreciate you saying that, Kenneth. And for what it's worth, I think you'd be an excellent counselor. You've always been a good listener, and you understand family dynamics from personal experience." 3 weeks later, my parents called me for the first time since graduation day. Their tone was dramatically different from our previous conversations. "Margaret," my mother began, "we were wondering if you might have some time to talk with Kenneth about career options in therapy. He's been asking about your field, and we thought you might be able to give him some guidance." I almost laughed out loud at the reversal. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. 6 months ago, my career in therapy was impractical and made me a failure. Now you want me to help Kenneth explore the same field. There was a long pause before my father spoke. "People can change their perspectives, Margaret. We've had time to think about your achievements, and we can see that you've been successful in your chosen field. So you're saying you were wrong when you called me a failure?" Another pause. "We're saying that perhaps we didn't fully understand the potential in your career path at the time." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest thing to an admission of error I'd ever heard from my parents. Still, their motivation was clear. They needed something from me now, so my previously worthless expertise had suddenly become valuable. "I'm happy to talk with Kenneth about therapy careers," I said. "But I want to be clear about something. This conversation doesn't erase what happened at my graduation, and it doesn't mean we're going back to the way things were." "What do you mean?" my mother asked. "I mean that if you want a relationship with me going forward, it's going to be based on mutual respect. No more comparing me unfavorably to Kenneth. No more dismissing my achievements or calling my choices impractical. No more claiming credit for my success after calling me a failure. Margaret, we're your parents. "We love you," my father said. "Love isn't just a feeling, Dad. It's also a behavior. And your behavior toward me for most of my life hasn't felt loving. It's felt conditional and judgmental." I could hear them whispering to each other in the background before my mother came back on the line. "We'd like to work on rebuilding our relationship with you if you're open to that." "I'm open to it," I said, "but it's going to require some real changes in how you interact with me, and it's going to take time to rebuild trust." We ended the call with an agreement to have lunch the following month, with the understanding that this would be a starting point for potentially repairing our relationship, not an immediate return to normal family dynamics. As I hung up the phone, I realized something important: I no longer needed their approval, which meant I could engage with them from a position of strength rather than desperation. If they were willing to change and treat me with respect, we might be able to build a healthier relationship. If they weren't, I'd already proven to myself that I could thrive without their validation. Either way, I was going to be fine. 2 years after that graduation day confrontation, I found myself in a place I never could have imagined. I was sitting in my own office at the therapy center I'd helped establish, looking at a wall covered with certificates, awards, and thank you letters from patients and their families. The regional conference presentation had led to national recognition, and I'd just been offered a position developing art therapy protocols for a major medical system. My personal life had flourished as well. David and I had moved in together, and he'd proposed 3 months earlier with a ring he'd designed himself, incorporating small gemstones in the colors I used most frequently in my artwork. We were planning a small wedding for the following spring, focused on celebrating with people who truly supported our relationship. Kenneth had indeed changed career paths and was thriving in a master's program for family therapy. We'd grown closer than we'd ever been, building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine understanding rather than our childhood roles as the favorite and the disappointment. He often said that watching me stand up for myself had given him permission to examine his own relationship with our parents and make changes that prioritized his happiness over their expectations. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something cautiously positive, though it remained fundamentally different from what it had been before graduation day. The lunch we'd had 14 months earlier had been awkward but productive. They'd made some effort to acknowledge their past behavior and express regret for how they'd treated me, though they'd never quite managed a full apology. More importantly, their behavior toward me had genuinely changed. They no longer dismissed my career or compared me unfavorably to Kenneth. They asked thoughtful questions about my work and seemed to genuinely listen to my answers. When I'd been featured in a professional journal earlier that year, my mother had called to congratulate me before posting anything on social media. The changes weren't perfect, and I remained cautious about trusting them completely. Years of conditional love and criticism don't heal overnight. But the relationship was improving, built on clearer boundaries and mutual respect. The most significant change, though, was internal. I no longer sought validation from people who had shown themselves incapable of providing it. My sense of self-worth came from my own achievements, the positive impact I had on my patients, and the love and support of people who had earned the right to influence how I felt about myself. Last month, I'd received an invitation to speak at my alma mater's graduation ceremony, sharing my story as an example of how graduates could build meaningful careers while staying true to their values. The invitation letter mentioned that they'd heard about my inspiring journey from graduation day forward and wanted current students to benefit from my experience. I'd accepted the invitation, planning to talk about resilient self-advocacy and the importance of building chosen families of support. But I'd also decided to address something that wasn't typically discussed at graduation ceremonies: what to do when the people who should be proudest of your achievements aren't able to celebrate them. Standing in my office, looking at the evidence of 2 years of professional growth and personal healing, I thought about that 22-year-old in her cap and gown, who'd finally found the courage to stop accepting unacceptable treatment. She'd been terrified that standing up for herself would mean losing her family forever. Instead, she'd discovered that some relationships improve when you refuse to settle for less than you deserve, and the ones that don't weren't worth keeping anyway. My phone rang, interrupting my reflection. It was Aunt Joyce calling with characteristic enthusiasm. "Margaret, I just saw the announcement about your graduation speech. I'm so proud of you, and I can't wait to be there to watch you inspire the next group of graduates." "Thanks, Aunt Joyce. I'm nervous about it, but I think I have something important to share." "You absolutely do. You know, I was just thinking about that day at the restaurant when you took the microphone. At the time, I thought it was the bravest thing I'd ever seen. Now I realize it was just the beginning." "The beginning of what?" "The beginning of you becoming the person you were always meant to be without apologizing for it or asking permission from people who couldn't see your worth anyway." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office for a few more minutes preparing for my next patient. In 20 minutes, I'd be helping a young girl process trauma through art, using techniques I'd developed through research and experience that my parents had once called impractical. Tonight, I'd go home to someone who celebrated my successes and supported my goals without reservation. This weekend, I'd have dinner with Kenneth and his girlfriend, talking about our careers, our relationships, and our shared experience of learning to prioritize our own happiness over other people's expectations. And next month, I'd stand in front of hundreds of new graduates and tell them something I wished someone had told me at 22: your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it, and the most important approval you'll ever receive is your own. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept less than you deserve, even if it means disappointing people you love. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved because it forces relationships to become healthier or reveals that they were never healthy to begin with. And sometimes when people tell you you're nothing but a failure, the best response is to prove them wrong by building a life so fulfilling that their opinion becomes irrelevant. As I prepare to close this chapter of my story, I want to share the most important lessons I've learned from that graduation day confrontation and everything that followed. These aren't just insights about difficult family relationships. They're truths about building a life that reflects your authentic self and surrounds you with people who celebrate rather than diminish your achievements. First, I learned that family love shouldn't come with conditions. Real love supports your dreams, celebrates your successes, and offers comfort during your struggles. It doesn't require you to minimize yourself to make others feel better, and it doesn't withdraw when you make choices that differ from what others would choose for you. If the love you're receiving feels conditional, it's worth examining whether it's actually love or simply control disguised as care. The journey of healing from conditional love takes time and it's not linear. There were days when I questioned whether I'd been too harsh, whether I should have tried harder to maintain peace, whether standing up for myself had been worth the conflict it created. But each time I doubted my decision, I reminded myself of how it felt to sit in that restaurant booth, while my own parents celebrated someone else's achievements while calling me a failure. No one should have to tolerate that kind of treatment regardless of the relationship. I also discovered the profound difference between seeking approval and building genuine confidence. For 22 years, I'd measured my worth by other people's reactions to my choices. When I stopped seeking validation from people who were determined not to give it, I found space to appreciate my own achievements and build relationships with people who supported my goals from the beginning. The confidence that comes from your own recognition of your worth is much more stable than confidence that depends on other people's moods or biases. Building chosen family became one of the most important skills I developed. Aunt Joyce, David, my colleagues, my close friends, and eventually Kenneth in our renewed relationship became the people whose opinions mattered to me. These weren't people I was related to by accident of birth. They were people who had earned the right to influence how I felt about myself through their consistent support, respect, and genuine care for my well-being. Chosen family doesn't replace biological family. It simply ensures that your support system is made up of people who actually support you. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. When you accept treatment that makes you feel small, worthless, or ashamed of your achievements, you're not being humble or family-oriented. You're enabling behavior that hurts you and often hurts the people doing it too. My parents' relationship with me didn't improve until I refused to participate in the dynamic that allowed them to dismiss my worth while expecting my continued presence in their lives. The changes weren't immediate or easy. Rebuilding trust took time, patience, and consistent evidence that they were committed to treating me differently. There were setbacks and conversations that fell back into old patterns. But the foundation had shifted. I was no longer willing to sacrifice my self-respect for the illusion of family harmony, and they eventually had to decide whether having a relationship with me was worth treating me with genuine respect. Not every story like mine has a happy ending with family reconciliation. Some people aren't capable of or interested in changing destructive patterns, and protecting yourself might mean maintaining distance permanently. That's okay too. You're not responsible for other people's willingness to grow, and you're not obligated to keep subjecting yourself to harmful treatment in the hope that they'll eventually change. What you are responsible for is recognizing your own worth, celebrating your own achievements, and surrounding yourself with people who see and appreciate who you really are. You're responsible for refusing to shrink yourself to fit into other people's limited vision of who you should be. 2 years after my graduation day, I can honestly say that the most liberating thing I ever did was stop trying to earn love from people who had already decided not to give it. The space that created allowed me to build relationships based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared values. It allowed me to pursue my career with confidence and passion, rather than constant self-doubt. It allowed me to become the person I was always meant to be. To anyone who recognizes their own story and mine, I want you to know that you deserve better than conditional love, dismissive treatment, or relationships that require you to minimize yourself for other people's comfort. You deserve to be celebrated for your achievements, supported in your struggles, and valued for who you are, rather than who others think you should be. Sometimes the family you choose loves you better than the one you're born into. That doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you wise. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your worth, even if it creates temporary conflict. Your achievements matter. Your dreams are valid. Your happiness is important. And anyone who can't celebrate those things doesn't deserve a front row seat to your life. What stories do you have about standing up for yourself or building chosen family? Have you ever had to set boundaries with people you love in order to protect your own well-being? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about resilient self-advocacy and building the life you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "Perfect, then don't claim my success later." And sometimes the most important person to convince of your value is yourself. Until next time, keep building the life that makes you proud, surrounded by people who celebrate rather than diminish your light.